looks like the lesbian space witches only had the power of one season.
I've kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended. But the first 6 are very much mine and my philosophy.
It's been months since The Acolyte was cancelled, and instead of owning up to the failure, Disney and its defenders are scrambling to spin the narrative they want fans to believe. They want the public to think the show was a success, despite overwhelming evidence pointing to the contrary. But there's one man who isn't buying the corporate spin: George Lucas himself. From the moment The Acolyte was announced, it was mired in controversy. Marketed as a fresh, innovative take on the Star Wars mythos, it quickly became apparent that the show was more focused on pushing an agenda than on telling a compelling story. Fans rejected The Acolyte in droves, and despite Disney's efforts to prop it up, the show failed spectacularly. Yet now, some media outlets and even the show's actors are trying to rewrite history, claiming it was a success. But George Lucas isn't buying it, and neither should you. Despite its financial and critical disaster, Disney-friendly media outlets rushed to spin The Acolyte as a major hit. Publications like Collider and Inverse boldly declared that the show's viewership numbers justified a renewal, with some even suggesting that Disney had made a mistake by canceling it. They've worked to recast the series as an unrecognized triumph, attempting to shift the narrative away from its failure. But the truth remains clear. The Acolyte didn't resonate with fans, and the spin doesn't change that reality.
Original thinking. Those big studios, they don't want that. They want something that is like something they've seen.
Hashtag The Acolyte getting canceled because incels couldn't handle a sexy black girl and a sexy Asian man serving evil, villainous romance.
But the truth is far less flattering. Reports claimed that The Acolyte was one of the most watched Star Wars series on Disney+, but that's like being the tallest building in a ghost town. Disney+ had a terrible year with original content struggling across the board. Even if The Acolyte was one of the most watched Star Wars shows of 2024, it was only competing against other underperforming series the entire platform was experiencing a downward trend in engagement, with subscribers losing interest in Disney's content as a whole. Another misleading claim involved the raw viewing numbers. Proponents of The Acolyte touted the 2.7 billion minutes. Proponents of The Acolyte pointed to the 2.7 billion minutes watched as proof of its success, but they conveniently failed to provide context. When compared to past Star Wars shows or even mediocre Netflix originals, this number was embarrassingly low. For example, The Mandalorian Season 3 managed over 6.5 billion minutes watched in just 12 weeks, despite being widely criticized as one of the weaker seasons. Even Andor, which itself struggled with audience engagement, still outperformed The Acolyte by a significant margin. The reality is simple: Disney was forced to cancel The Acolyte because it was a money-losing disaster. Despite the spin and the attempts to dress it up as a success, the show's performance was a clear indication that it simply couldn't deliver the kind of return on investment that Disney expected.
Every new Star Wars show should have an audience of 0. Every new Star Wars film should make $0 at the box office.
Scotty says, so this is how creativity dies, with thunderous applause.
As the viewership numbers continued to plummet, it became apparent that The Acolyte was not the hit Disney had hoped for. After an initial surge of interest, the show struggled to maintain any lasting engagement. This sharp decline in viewership after just 2 episodes is a clear indicator that the show failed to capture and hold onto its audience, a stark contrast to the sustained popularity of other Star Wars series like The Mandalorian and Andor. If Disney truly believed The Acolyte was a success, they would have doubled down on the series, given the lucrative potential of expanding the Star Wars universe. Instead, they made the pragmatic decision to pull the plug, a move that further underscores the show's lack of viability. Media outlets and social media campaigns may try to spin the narrative and push a different story, but the reality remains: The Acolyte was a financial and creative disappointment. With Disney's tendency to cling to successful franchises, the cancellation of The Acolyte speaks volumes about the show's inability to deliver on its promises. The decision to abandon the series is not only a reflection of its poor performance but also a sign that Disney is unwilling to continue investing in a project that couldn't live up to the expectations set by its predecessors. As the dust settles, it's clear that The Acolyte was far from the triumph its defenders have claimed it to be. Audience interest in The Acolyte collapsed so dramatically that by the season finale, hardly anyone was watching. When compared to other Star Wars series, the numbers for The Acolyte were nothing short of embarrassing. Even shows that were considered underwhelming, like Andor and The Book of Boba Fett, performed far better. For perspective, The Mandalorian Season 3, despite being widely criticized for its weaker storyline, still managed to pull in 6.5 billion minutes watched in its first 12 weeks. In contrast, The Acolyte barely reached 2.7 billion minutes after 6 months, less than half the viewership of a show that fans were already calling a disappointment. This stark difference in performance further highlights just how much The Acolyte struggled to connect with viewers. It's a clear indication that the show failed to capture the magic of previous Star Wars installments, and its numbers tell the story that the Defenders and Spin Doctors can't obscure.
At everyone celebrating The Acolyte getting canceled, I will place a curse on your entire bloodline.
The whole franchise is owned by feminists and left-wing activists, people who hate the audience and hate the material that they've been entrusted with.
Even Ahsoka, which had a budget half the size of The Acolyte, managed to reach over 4 billion minutes watched. In comparison, The Acolyte not only underperformed, but it also cost significantly more than most of the shows it was compared to. One of the main talking points from The Acolyte's defenders is that it was one of the most watched Disney Plus originals of 2024. However, what they conveniently leave out is that Disney Plus had one of its worst years ever. The platform saw a major drop in engagement, with declining subscriber numbers and a string of underperforming original series. In this context, The Acolyte's performance looks even worse. It wasn't a standout success. It was just another show struggling to make an impact in an already underwhelming year for Disney Plus. When you factor in these broader challenges, it becomes clear that The Acolyte's numbers don't tell the whole story. Despite the media spin, its performance was far from stellar in both a financial and cultural sense. Competing with massive hits, The Acolyte was barely edging out other flops like Agatha, Coven of Chaos and Echo, both of which were widely regarded as failures for Marvel Studios. In any other year, its numbers wouldn't even be worth bragging about. In fact, The Acolyte's performance highlights a deeper issue. Disney's struggle to deliver content that truly resonates with its audience. If anything, the failure of The Acolyte is another sign of how far Disney has fallen. The company's inability to consistently produce must-watch content is becoming more apparent with each new release. Not long ago, Star Wars projects dominated pop culture, with each new series or film being a major event. The excitement surrounding every new entry in the franchise was palpable, and fans eagerly anticipated what would come next. Now, with series like The Acolyte struggling to find an audience, it's clear that the magic that once made Star Wars and Disney content so compelling is fading. The company's recent track record has raised questions about its ability to reignite the spark that once made it a cultural powerhouse.
There is no conceivable incentive for anyone to watch any Star Wars content again. I'm not even asking you to boycott.
Scotty, I gotta be real with you. Creativity died at Disney a very, very long time ago.
Now, shows like The Acolyte come and go with little more than a whimper, struggling to capture even a fraction of the excitement that once defined the Star Wars franchise. According to insiders, Lucas has made it clear that the failure of The Acolyte wasn't just about one bad show, it's about Disney's complete mishandling of the entire Star Wars universe. Ever since Disney acquired Star Wars, Lucas has remained relatively quiet about their creative decisions. However, those close to him say he's become increasingly frustrated by what he sees as a complete disregard for the storytelling principles that made the franchise what it is. For Lucas, Star Wars was always about more than just spectacular visuals and flashy marketing. It was about depth, mythology, and a clear sense of purpose. What he perceives from Disney's handling of the franchise, especially with shows like The Acolyte, is a departure from those foundational elements. This frustration speaks to a larger issue that goes beyond one failed series. Lucas feels that the essence of what made Star Wars a cultural touchstone is being lost in favor of corporate-driven decisions that don't honor the legacy he built. Great, Lucas has reportedly pointed to The Acolyte as a perfect example of what's gone wrong with Star Wars under Disney's watch. According to sources, Lucas believes the show ignored the deep lore of Star Wars, replacing beloved storytelling elements with shallow narratives that prioritize identity politics over crafting a compelling space opera. Instead of respecting the mythology he carefully built, Disney has continuously chosen to prioritize modern messaging over the core themes that made Star Wars resonate with audiences for generations. Lucas has been particularly frustrated with how Disney has handled key eras in the Star Wars timeline, including the prequel and original trilogies. Instead of building upon these established foundations, Disney has, in his view, attempted to rewrite or dilute the essence of the franchise in an effort to make it more in line with current cultural trends. This has led to an erosion of the very elements that made Star Wars so iconic: its mythology, its exploration of good versus evil, and its deep, timeless themes. For Lucas, the core appeal of Star Wars was always its universal messages, its rich world-building, and the grand mythology he created. Disney's shift in focus, particularly in shows like The Acolyte, has only reinforced his frustrations and doubts about the future direction of the franchise.
I disliked the business of Hollywood intensely. When I had that choice of Star Wars being a success, I said, I'm going to try to make a go for it.
The High Republic era, which the Acolyte attempted to explore, was originally meant to represent a golden age for the Jedi, a time of wisdom, adventure, and expansion. However, instead of highlighting the noble warriors Lucas envisioned, the show depicted the Jedi as incompetent, confused, and unlikable, marking a stark departure from the ideals that were at the heart of Star Wars. For Lucas, this rewriting of Star Wars history has been one of his biggest grievances. Beyond the Acolyte, Lucas has expressed broader concerns about Disney's overall handling of the Star Wars franchise. Insiders reveal that Lucas feels his carefully crafted universe has been undermined by decisions that prioritize trends and modern-day issues over the storytelling foundations he laid out. His frustrations extend to how key aspects of the Star Wars mythology, such as the moral clarity and heroism of characters, have been diluted in favor of agendas that he believes detract from the core of what made Star Wars resonate so deeply with audiences. This ongoing shift in direction has led Lucas to question whether the franchise he built has been irrevocably changed, and whether its legacy can ever truly be preserved under Disney's current stewardship. The sequel trilogy, which sidelined classic characters and failed to develop compelling new ones, was already a glaring sign of Disney's inability to understand what made Star Wars special. The Acolyte proved to be just another step in that same direction, showing that rather than learning from past mistakes, Disney doubled down on alienating the core fanbase that helped make Star Wars a cultural phenomenon in the first place. Instead of embracing the timeless themes of heroism, adventure, and morality that were central to Star Wars, Disney has prioritized corporate-driven agendas that many fans feel undermine the heart of the franchise. The focus on pushing political or social messages over delivering compelling storytelling has turned fans away in droves. The result is a franchise that has become increasingly disconnected from the values and narratives that originally made it so beloved. For many longtime fans, Star Wars was never just about spectacle. It was about the rich mythology, the deep moral questions, and the timeless appeal of its characters. Disney's approach has diminished that legacy, and as the franchise continues down this path, it's becoming clear that their vision for Star Wars is a far cry from the one George Lucas first created.
Acolyte has not been renewed for a season 2 on Disney+, and some people, mainly leftists, are not happy about it.
As a result, Lucas has grown increasingly disillusioned with Disney's stewardship of Star Wars. While he may not publicly speak out against the company, those close to him say that he has little faith in their ability to course correct. If anything, the Acolyte's failure only reinforced what Lucas has known for years. Under Disney's leadership, Star Wars is no longer the franchise he created. Some Acolyte actors, including Rebecca Henderson, have been vocal about their belief that the show was unfairly cancelled. Henderson, who is married to showrunner Leslie Headland, has expressed frustration with the decision and has publicly stated that the cancellation of The Acolyte was not due to any inherent flaws in the show itself, but because of the company's mismanagement and failure to understand what made Star Wars so special. However, Lucas and many fans see the failure as another example of how Disney's approach to Star Wars continues to stray further from the storytelling principles that made the franchise iconic in the first place. For Lucas, this represents not only the loss of creative control over his creation, but the dilution of the Star Wars legacy itself. The show's cancellation, paired with the underwhelming performance of recent Star Wars projects, only deepens his concerns about the future of the galaxy far, far away under Disney's control. Repeated posts demanding a second season can change the reality of the Acolyte's performance. Despite certain media outlets continuing to push the narrative that the show was a hidden success, the numbers tell a different story. The strategy seems clear: create enough noise, repeat the claim frequently, and hope that people forget the reality. However, fans aren't falling for it. Sources close to Lucas suggest that he believes Disney has abandoned what made Star Wars special. Rather than focusing on timeless storytelling and beloved characters, Disney has prioritized ideological messaging and inexperienced showrunners. The Acolyte wasn't just a failure because audiences rejected it. It was doomed from the start by Disney's refusal to respect the very foundation Lucas built. Star Wars was founded on universal themes: the hero's journey, the battle between good and evil, and the importance of hope. Disney, however, has turned it into a platform for divisive social commentary, alienating the very fan base that made Star Wars the cultural phenomenon it once was. When compared to past failures, The Acolyte stands out as one of the worst-performing Star Wars projects in history. Even Solo, often cited as a major flop, performed better when adjusted for its budget. No amount of media spin or repeated claims can change the hard truth. The show underperformed and failed to connect with its intended audience. Corporate damage control can't change the fact that The Acolyte was a disaster, and George Lucas knows exactly why it happened. Fans have spoken loud and clear. They want Star Wars to return to its roots. They crave compelling stories, well-developed characters, and a universe that feels true to the original vision. Until Disney acknowledges this, the franchise will continue to decline. With Disney struggling to recover from multiple Star Wars failures, the future of the franchise remains uncertain. Lucas may no longer have control over his creation, but his words still carry weight. As fans continue to call out Disney's mistakes, one thing is clear: Star Wars will never be the same until the people running it start listening to the fans and to the man who built this universe in the first place. Comment your thoughts and subscribe to our channel. We need your support.